Okay, everybody, I think we're going to get started. Thank you. I hope everybody had a few minutes to mill around and take a look at the maps that are there. And if you didn't see it, you'll have time to still put in a few comments on the sticky board. There were a couple of questions that were asked that we'd just like to have some input on in terms of your thoughts about living in a rural community, and for some people maybe that are new, or why you moved here, or why you're still living here. So feel free to add some things to that whiteboard. So let me get going, and I'm going to have a little cheat sheet just in case I forget what I wanted to say. But anyway, so first of all, good evening, everybody. Thanks for coming, even though it was a slight rainy night. I wasn't sure everybody was going to tackle that, but it worked out fine. So if those of you who may not know me, I'm Chris Fowles. I'm the chair of the Select Board, and really do want to thank everybody for coming out tonight. It's unusual to have a meeting probably on this night of the week for a lot of people, a public meeting, but this was the time that we were able to get a lot of people together to do that. And this basically, is a meeting that is trying to bring a few people together, and we really appreciate your time. We know your time is precious, and you've got multiple commitments and juggling priorities and so forth. So thanks for making time in your busy schedules to come out tonight and devote a little bit of time to this discussion. As you've seen over time, the discussion itself has been billed as a community conversation, basically entitled Water, Roads, and Public Safety. And this actually represents the first time that we've had a grouping of town officials together with residents to actually get together and have a good discussion and have an overview, especially of departments, what they do, and some of the challenges they face. And I think that will be instructive for all of us. While the idea for this meeting actually originated back after a tragic fire event back here in February, we really felt that it's important to have this kind of a community discussion, and it really will serve us to be informed, especially with an ever-growing population and changing demographics in town, to all be informed and understand what it is to live in a rural community. So tonight's discussion is intended to be informational and relevant to any emergency that we may have. There's many emergencies. All of our town officials here are involved with so many different things that they have to face on a daily basis in their jobs that maybe we know very little about. So tonight is to talk about all of that as well. And the next hour is really going to be an opportunity for us to all sit back and listen and learn from the town officials that are here. And then, have a chance to share some expectations, ask questions, make some suggestions as we kind of plan toward the future. So that's kind of the overview. And before I would like to introduce the town officials that are here tonight, but before I do that, I wanted to extend a thank you because of all the hard work and all the countless hours I think that they all put in to serve the residents of town. And so we thank them for their service to the town. They and their teams put out a monumental effort on a daily basis, and we just really want to acknowledge that they are the ones that help us live here in Southampton, and really help us call Southampton a place called home for all of us, I think, that are here. So we really do appreciate their efforts. And so tonight, let me introduce a few people that are here. And we have, first and foremost, our Fire Chief, John Workman, our Highway Superintendent, Randall Kemp, our Police Chief, Ian Illingsworth, two of our Water Commissioners, Joe Slattery and Tim Gaudette, our Chair of our Planning Board, Paul Diamond, and we have a couple of our Select Board members here tonight, aside from myself. New Select Board member, Stephen Johnson, new Select Board member, Dan LaValle, a couple of former Select Board members in the audience, Francine Tishman and Renee Groden, and I think many of you have met Ed Gibson, our town administrator. So if you haven't, that's all of us. And so lastly, I want to introduce the person who's going to be very important to us tonight, who's going to keep us focused and on track. And this is Debbie Linnengale. And Debbie hails from the town of Wendell, which honestly I had to look up on a map to know where it was. But anyway, she is a very experienced trainer, mediator, facilitator, and was gracious enough to accept our offer to come and help us carry out this important conversation tonight. So we're going to look forward to Debbie being here and keeping us all on track and focused on our discussion. And just a last thing, we're obviously being recorded by Easthampton Media. It's not live tonight, but it will be on YouTube and 191 probably within the next 48 hours, I'm sure. Okay? All right, so good. Thanks. Debbie, take it away.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to be here in Southampton. Just as Chris was talking about having to look up Wendell, I did have to do a little bit more research to understand the full picture of what was Southampton, and it's a pleasure to have been getting to hang out here a little bit. One of the things that I have been struck by in some of the work that I do is a quote that talks about the most resilient communities being the ones that have the strongest social infrastructure. And so when I see groups of people gathered together to talk about important topics, that to me is a sign of something that is working and that's really important to do. So I am celebrating that fact here too. So we're going to be talking a little bit more about the agenda and plans for tonight in just a moment. But before we do that, echoing a little bit of what Chris said here to start, as we all know, it takes a lot to make a town run, and you're going to hear a lot of appreciation for folks that you're both hearing from tonight and many others that aren't going to be speaking to you about their roles in town. And we just want to celebrate the work, much of which is often done by volunteers. I don't know about how it is wholly here in Southampton, but where I live, it's a real effort to find engaged, committed folks who show up. So I just appreciate seeing that when I do. Also of note, I heard that this week is EMS and Public Works Week, so yay teams who are working on those aspects of the world. But a town is more than the officials and the folks who do the work. It's also the community. The community is the heart of the town. And so I also am grateful for those of you who are attending here and for those who may be watching this after the fact in the recording. Thanks to the Easthampton folks for doing that, making that possible. As Chris also mentioned, some of these discussions are ones that obviously would be ongoing in any case, but this particular one was spurred on in part by the unfortunate results of a major fire that happened here. And while this is only one event among many, and there are different things that have happened in each of those, and in many cases those events are unseen, we felt that we really wanted to acknowledge the impact of this particular one, and for that purpose we are hoping to invite Lisa York up to speak to us about what happened on February 28th. Lisa?
Thank you for having this meeting. We requested it a while back, and I'm happy to be standing in front of you. 7:20, February 28th, there was a 911 call. And we live 5 minutes from the fire department, and it took 40 minutes to get water on the house, I believe. Engine 1 came up. I was told by the fire chief that the engine 1 drove past the driveway that was clearly labeled 79, drove past it, then backed up, got the back end stuck on a old-fashioned stone wall that doesn't move. So then it was kitty corner and blocked the 5-minute range to route from the fire department to the house. There is a private road, Fontaine Road, but for some reason that was blocked by, I don't know if it was a fire truck or a highway department truck. So it took 40 minutes for water, and then an hour later, I think it was 10 minutes of 9, that's when they finally called, because I was able to listen to the 911 call. They finally called for a shuttle for tankers. So yes, we live without hydrants, but this is what makes Southampton, as you call it, rural. And if you look at the open space plan, rural Southampton, that's why people move here, because it's special. So we've never had hydrants up here, but we should have a department that is able to protect our houses. And people are talking about expensive cisterns and this and that, but just, I was brought up on a farm. You can't buy more than you can afford. So what happened to the 3,200-gallon tanker truck we used to have that was decommissioned without many citizens of Southampton knowing that? And I think when we met with you the first Tuesday of whatever, the first meeting after the fire, you said that the tanker was getting back into use, and I don't know if that has happened yet, but we have seen, and it was nice, Chief Workman met with me and we talked about things, but just moving forward, since this house has been destroyed and everyone's fine physically, but I cannot imagine what emotion, because I'm just a neighbor and it touched me. So thank you for having this meeting, and I hope we are able to move forward and learn from this. And with an incoming chief, what are the expectations, or what is the procedure of a new chief? Because earlier this month, not this month, maybe April, one of the select board during your meetings, one member said, we'll just call so-and-so and so-and-so and see if we can hold it together until we get a full-time chief. Hold it together? Look what happened when we had a fire chief full-time, and we're going to hold it together. And I believe it was air quotes, I don't know. But that was a punch to my gut, okay? So I hope we can work forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lisa. And just a moment, if we can all just sit with what the reality of tragedies, however they occur, wherever they occur, and those who are putting their lives on the line in order to respond to them, just sort of sit with what that means here in a small town like this, where you all know each other, right? You talk with each other, you know what the impacts are. So just feeling that. All right, so for the rest of the evening, it kind of fits into two parts. And Ed, I wonder if we could go forward 2 slides, please. So I want to go over just briefly kind of what the outline for the evening is going to be. This first half is going to be focused on really what I think of it as is building foundations. Some of you are probably really knowledgeable about some things in town, but it's really hard for any of us to know everything about everything that happens in town. And so building up everyone's knowledge of how things work in Southampton feels like it's kind of a critical piece before we all start talking about what ideas might work and how we can move forward. So this first part of the evening is really focused on that question of building up everyone's knowledge of what happens here. So we're going to be hearing specifically from 4 different town entities. First, we'll hear from the water commissioners. Second, we're going to hear from the highway department. Third, we'll hear from the planning board. And then fourth, we'll hear from the fire department. Each of those brief presentations, we're striving for about 5 minutes each. Each of those brief presentations will be followed by a question and answer period. I do want to stress that the intention behind those question and answer periods for this part of the meeting is really just to make sure that you have the information you need in order to have more of a conversation going forward. So it's not really so much about comments or reactions or new ideas. That's coming, but not yet. So in this first part, that is presentations and question and answer period. And we'll keep a running list if anything comes up that's outside of one person's presentation, so we can come back to that. All right, the second part of the evening, after we do a brief break, which I'll explain more about when we get there, the second part of the evening is going to start with, I'm loosing the bonds here and inviting folks to share comments, reactions, thoughts about what you will have heard in the first part of this evening. But there is a focus, and I've really appreciated this in the conversations I've had, both with folks from town and also to some degree with others who've been recently impacted. There is a focus on moving forward. And so we really want to make sure that part of our time in the second half of the meeting is to be able to get your ideas out. What do we want to do about what the realities are? What is great and you want to just keep it in place? What do you see as things that need to be addressed? What ideas do you have about how that should happen? And hopefully finding that there's some coalescing around a few of those that we want to move forward and taking some specific steps in order to make them actually happen. So that's kind of the outline, and then a closing for the evening. We've set aside a couple of hours for this meeting. If we don't need it, we'll obviously end early. I know you'll all be disappointed, but that's the plan for right now. Guidelines for tonight. As a community conversation, the intention is that we all have a chance to hear each other. So if you've got something to say, we want to make sure you have the chance to say it, and we want to give you a chance also to hear from other folks. So that's a big part of all of this. I hope that we'll do that in a spirit of respect, honoring differences. You don't all have to agree about what's happening here. It's not a debate, but we are talking about important things that affect you all. So really hoping that we have a good conversation. Asking once you do speak, either to ask a question or to offer a comment, that you share the time. We're going to try to make sure that everyone who needs to say something gets an opportunity to do that. So if you've already spoken, either to ask a question in a particular section or to give a comment, we'll ask that you hold back to allow others who may not have yet had that opportunity to speak. The other thing I would say about that is that I understand it's your normal here in Southampton that when you do speak, you start off with your name and your address, just so everyone gets a sense of what the context is for your comments. We'll be asking folks, if possible, to limit their questions and comments to about a minute. Again, just in the interest of making sure everyone gets a chance to speak. As a facilitator, I may let you know, hey, you're getting up to that 1 minute, and invite you to wrap up so that others can also get a chance to speak. Any questions about sort of the hopes for how this might run? Folks good? Okay. I probably don't need to say this, but I will just say, take care of yourself. You know, if you need to step out for a little break, go to the bathroom, stand up in the back, that's great. No problem at all. All right, so let's go ahead and move forward into the first part of this meeting, which is this orientation piece. And so the idea here, again, is that each of the folks who are here are going to give a brief presentation, and then I will invite folks to do a question and answer, to raise any questions. We do have a couple of cordless mics, so when we get to the point of asking a question, if you could just raise your hand if you're one of those folks who wants to ask something, and Ed or others will help make sure that you have it so that we can all hear you. I do ask you to speak with a mic because people like me with soft voices are hard for other folks to hear. All right, so let's go ahead and get started, and we're going to start with the water commissioners, and Tim Gaudette is going to be with us first. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Tim Gaudette. I'm on the Board of Water Commissioners. So for the Southampton Water Department, there's 3 elected water commissioners. So myself, Joe Slattery, and newly elected Charles Konecki, but he hasn't been sworn in yet, so he's not officially a water commissioner until tomorrow. And then there's, oh, he has been sworn. Oh, he's okay. So now we have 3. Great. Oh, done. I'll just lean down. That's okay. So, 3 water commissioners, and then we have 2 full-time water people. There's Superintendent Tom Gons and water technician Dennis Senecal. Dennis is here tonight. I just want to point out for the water commissioners, Joe Slattery was a water commissioner for 20 years, so he has a lot of knowledge on the system. He was a commissioner when much of the system was installed. So if any difficult questions come my way, I'm gonna refer them to Joe. So if you go to the town website and look up the water department, you'll see I You just move to the next this slide. Yeah. So you'll see the general responsibilities and duties of the water department. So, first and foremost is to provide, safe and abundant source of drinking water. Also, to provide adequate water supply and pressure for firefighting, and of course that's a key topic for tonight. Maintain the well pump station and distribution system. Manage and protect the water supplies. So part of protecting the water supplies is, we treat the water, we chlorinate it, we adjust the pH, we test it frequently, seek new sources for future water supply demands. We, part of our responsibility is anticipating, future needs, to future population and water usage and so on, and trying to, manage the system to make sure we stay in front of that. Respond to public and requests, and so this meeting is part of that responsibility, and also follow enterprise funding. We are an enterprise fund, so our expenses are largely covered by water usage fees. We also apply for a lot of grant money. We have a upcoming project on Route 10, and that project is we're getting ARPA funding from the federal government to help support that. So we move to the next slide. We get kind of the water system. Sure. I'm sorry.
Patrice Crevier, 44 Crooked Ledge Road. It's just you missed the section that said that you provide ample water where there are fire hydrants. You missed about there being fire hydrants. So, so that's
sorry.
kind of just an important thing with what a lot
you're
of people
right.
are
Thank you
upset
for
about.
that. I kind of went through that really quickly. I apologize. So pressure, for firefighting where there's hydrants available. And later on, I'm going to show you a map that shows kind of where in town the water system is, and then where at the higher elevation parts of town is not. So, all right, thanks for that. Sorry, Ed. So just by the numbers, we provide service for 1,640 connections. So that serves a population of almost 5,000 people, which is roughly 80% of the population in town. So we have 45 miles of water mains, and I think I saw in one of the later presentations, I think that in town there's over 60 miles of roads in town. So that's roughly about 70% of the roads in town are covered by water mains. We have 350 hydrants, and so when you do the math on that, 45 miles, 350 hydrants, it's about, eight hydrants per mile. There's approximately 450 private wells in town. In fact, I'm on a private well. There's more details. Like I said earlier, if you go to the town website and you go to the water department page, you'll see resources. There's a water system master plan that was done in 2016. And there's kind of other resources. There's an annual water quality report that encourage everyone to take a look at. So we could go to the next slide. So the system, I'm just going to talk about just a few key elements of the system. First and foremost is the well and pumping station at the intersection of Glendale Road and Route 10. So that was installed in 2002. And the source of our water is the Barnes Aquifer, an underground water source. And so there's a control unit at the pumping station, and so that control unit receives signals from the well. We'll talk about the well in a minute, but that's on Wilcott Road. So when the water level in the well gets low, down to 10 feet, pumps turn on, and then it runs and to fill the system, fill the tank until the water level gets up to like 15 feet. So the pump doesn't run continuously, but rather it runs to fill the well, and then pump shuts off, and then the water is supplied from the tank. This main pumping system last year provided 97% of the water in town. So the other 3% comes from Easthampton. So back a couple years ago, we installed a new booster pumping station right at the Southampton Easthampton line. It's right by the Tractor Supply store. You see a little building there. That's the Easthampton pumping station. Any water that comes from Easthampton we have to buy, and we buy a small amount of water during peak demands in the summer. So when our system's maxed out in the summer, then we buy from Easthampton, and usually about once a month we'll run that system just to make sure everything's in good working order. I need a clicker. So that's the water supply, and then I referenced the tank on Wolcott Road. So this tank was it's been there since 1991. Volume is 744,000 gallons. And so there's a number of sizing criteria for the tank, and one of them is to have adequate fire flow storage. And so there's a insurance service organization or ISO requirement that we provide 3,500 gallons per minute for up to 3 hours. And so if you do the math on that, that's in the order of 600,000 gallons. And so our tank exceeds that. So and that's just water from the tank. I mean, we also would have capability from the pumps, both our pumping system as well as Easthampton. And then a key point is that the base elevation of this tank is 438 feet. And so that tank, at that elevation, the water pressure is it's basically 0 psi gauge. It's just atmospheric pressure. And so any elevation above that, we can't provide water for. It's a gravity-fed system, so just due to physics, we can't go at higher elevations. And then we have there's a guideline from DEP that says that the minimum static pressure in the system should be 35 psi. So if the tank is at this level at lower altitudes, then the lower you get, the higher the pressure. And so you have to really go down 80 feet from the tank to get 35 psi. So that results in kind of an altitude of 358 feet. So any home at an elevation above 358 feet is not served by our water system. And so this is illustrated on the map on the next page. There's also a map out. You might have seen it out behind you. But if we go to the next slide, I can show the map. Yeah. So the items in yellow on the map show the high elevation. So that's part of the system where it's physically impossible for us to provide water. And so you can see kind of it's highlighted all the roads. It's hard to see on this map, but there is a version of this map out behind you. And then that's just the location of the elements, where the Glendale well is, the storage tank, and the pumping station. So, and then I have one last slide just that shows it's a map that was also out behind you that shows the location of the hydrants. Like I said, the hydrants are they're located, roughly every 1/8 of a mile apart on average. So that's it.
Okay. All right, folks. So at this point, if you have a question, I'll invite you to come on up to one of the mics that's stationary over here. I see we've got somebody who's already up here. Again, encouraging you to start with your name and address if you haven't already, which I know you have, and to focus on questions rather than comments at this point in time. Go ahead.
So just for clarification, on the map previous, sorry, Ed, but the highlighted yellow, so on Wolcott Road, that well is it's somewhat high up on a hill, but then there's a huge hill behind that, so there's
Oh,
no
yeah.
way it can
That's right.
get water to
That-
those
That's correct,
spots.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah,
Just
so,
for clarification.
right.
Anyone else, do you want to come on up, please? If you don't mind coming to the microphones, just so everyone can hear.
How often are the hydrants tested?
And I'm going to defer that question to... You have to talk to me.
Most of the hydrants are flushed on a yearly basis, and they're looked at, and if there's any damages or anything, or any repairs that gotta be made, they're made at that particular time, or very shortly thereafter.
When they are tested or flushed, do they get, is there a rate of flow at that point? Is that,
Most of the hydrants have been flushed, and most of them have done fire flows. And down in the office, there's a full chart of what the fire flows were at what the residual pressures were.
and the date of testing or flushing?
What did she say?
The date
Is it
that,
documented? Is the date of testing and flushing documented?
Yes.
and
Yes.
where is the office that this,
That
chart.
would be at the office on Pequot Road.
okay, thank you.
Want to go ahead and give another person a chance? Come on up.
Hi, Sherry York, 69 Maple Street. Sherry York, 69 Maple Street. The question is on the pumping station on Wolcott. So if it can't provide water to some of the higher elevations, can not that station fill pump tanks that would provide water? Is that the idea? Like
So Wolcott Road, that's a tank, not the pumping station?
the
So
tank?
the tank's on
Can't you-
Wolcott.
Can you gather water into a tank from that station?
I don't believe so.
So how do you get the water out of there to,
Well, through the hydrant?
oh, that supplies the
That would,
hydrant?
yeah, so that tank then provides...
So any of the hydrants would fill the tanks that would provide
Yeah,
water?
I-
Is that the
I-
plan? Is that how it happens?
I can't answer that. So how is the tank filled? Can someone hook up directly to the tank, to the water tank? So how is a tanker truck filled?
It's pumped from the artesian well down on College Highway and from the Easthampton booster system up to the tank. And there is a hydrant at the tank, but that hydrant is for tank maintenance. And you couldn't get, any vehicle down to where that hydrant is.
I see, thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions from someone who has not yet had a chance to ask questions about the water system?
Joe Jamrog, 80 Glendale Road. I just have a question. We only have one well pump working. What happens if that pump goes down? Where does the water supply come from?
At that point in time, if that pump goes down, then we'll be pumping water from Easthampton.
And they would have enough to supply what we
We
need
can
on a
take
daily basis?
750 gallons a minute off of the system in Easthampton,
Okay, which we would have to pay for.
We'd have to
which
pay.
we'd have to pay for.
What is there any proposal as to putting in another system besides the one that we currently have in place?
Yes, there's the, in the master plan, it shows that we would be putting another tank up on College Highway in the vicinity of where the Hoyle water transmission main crosses College Highway, because that is a point where the elevations of the Walcott Road tank and that location are both the same. So we wouldn't have to put any Ross valves in to take care of a differential in pressure heads.
Okay, so if that goes out, we draw all the water from Easthampton and we have to pay for it
Yes.
Yes.
until we repair it.
Right, that's right. That actually happened a couple of years ago where there was a 2-week period where our system was down, and so Easthampton provided, all the water.
I've been in a town for 40 years. Didn't we at one time have 2 wells going at the same time? Joe?
Yes, we had the original well that was put in back in 1964 was a natural developed gravel well, which had what they call an Everdur metal screen in it. The Everdur metal screen started to collapse, and we tried to rehabilitate it at one time, and that well was supposed to produce between 450 and 500 gallons a minute, and it was only going to produce roughly about 100 gallons a minute.
Didn't make any sense.
So we did not feel that it was worth trying to go in there and re-sleeve that well, because it was only an 8-inch well to start with, and we would have had to sleeve it down to a 6-inch well. That would have produced the same amount of water, but you can't get a pump down a 6-inch well that will produce that type of water, because a pump that would have to be like a turbine-driven pump, and most of them start out like about 7 and 15/16 OD.
Okay.
So,
Thank you, Joe. Take care.
Thanks. Let me just ask if anyone who has not yet asked a question has anything for the water department, for the water commissioners? Okay, go ahead.
Hi, so I hope I'm not stepping out of line, but I don't know if Sherry's question was answered. I think she was just asking, where do they fill the tanker from? If the tanker were operational, do they fill it from a hydrant?
So
That's what the answer was.
and
Okay.
I've got that question here, so we'll also circle back to that when it comes time for Chief Workman's. Thank you. Thank you, Tim.
Yeah.
All right, so let's go ahead and move to the Highway Department and Randall Kemp.
Randall Kemp, Southampton Highway Superintendent. I live on Fulmer Road. So I tried to put together some facts of statistics of what we have in town. We have 67 miles of maintained town roads. 61 and almost a half are paved, and 5.5 are unpaved. When we talk about upgrading roads, you have to look at costs, where the money's going to come from. For example, we fund our roads through the general fund, Chapter 90, and sometimes grants, and bigger projects through the State Transportation Improvement Program. General funds, we appropriate about $161,000 of general highway funds for roads. Chapter 90, we are appropriated $314,000 every year, and then grants have different availability. If we use tip money that I referenced earlier, you have to comply with state directives like sidewalks and shared use paths and all that stuff. And then some other considerations. Several roads in town are scenic roads. There are protections for stone walls and things of that nature. Next slide, please. So some of the responsibilities under the Highway Department are snow and ice control, road maintenance, replacement of street traffic signs and road markings, roadside vegetation control, removing fallen trees from roadways, maintenance of bridges and guardrails, street sweeping and other stormwater responsibilities, facilities maintenance of the highway garage and transfer station, groundskeeping of town properties, operation and management of the underground fuel storage tank system, operation and management of the transfer station. We provide daily garbage pickup for town properties. We coordinate with the water superintendent to provide staff and equipment whenever there's a water main break or they're doing a service install. And my office issues, oh, I missed one. Maintenance and repair of our vehicle fleet and equipment. And we issue several permits through the highway department. We are currently doing this with, if I was fully staffed, I'd have 8 highway department workers and a half-time admin. Right now we have 4 highway workers, so we're pretty low on staff. Next slide. This is just a table which shows the cost of different pavement preservation techniques. Full construction, that's, for example, what we did on Glendale Road from Pomeroy Meadow to Route 10. Full reconstruction, this cost estimate is based on the most current cost estimate we have for East Street, and it's $8 million a mile. Full depth reclamation, that would be a machine comes through, grinds up the pavement, it gets rolled down as base, and then you put on a binder layer and a top coat. That is like $50 to $60 a square yard. Mill and fill is what a lot of places do. They go and scarify the pavement and then put a new top coat on. That's $14 to $15 a square yard. Just a regular overlay, which is, we do this a lot, is $10 to $11 a square yard. Micro seal, we just performed this pavement preservation technique on 9 different subdivisions off Pomeroy Meadow Road. That's $6 to $8 a square yard. And crack seal is just a preventative measure to try to keep water from infiltrating into the pavement, which if you let water get into the base, frost will heave it and it'll tear your road apart faster. So on a degradation curve of a brand new road, you want to try to employ all these techniques. Crack seal is like the cheapest preservation method, all the way up to a road that's completely gone. It would need full depth reclamation or reconstruction. Given the available money I mentioned earlier, you can see what the cost per mile is. You can see the problem we have with keeping up with roads. So, do I have another slide, Ed? No, okay. So basically, I could go on for a long time talking about the different things we do, but I'm curious what questions you all have.
Great, welcoming folks to come on up for questions related to the highway department.
Linda Day, 41 Maple Street. I just wanted to know, Maple Street is a scenic road. So can anything be done to improve it so it's not so dangerous?
Well, as a scenic road, wow, it's loud. You know, many of the activities to change the roadway would have to be approved by the planning board. As far as dangerous, what do you mean by dangerous?
Well, dangerous, well, like where Bill's house was, Bill York's house was, where the fire was, that's dangerous. That's the whole section. Oh, I'm sorry. That whole section is dangerous where the York fire was. And even coming down from my house, from 41 Maple Street, the road is slim. And when there's 2 cars or the school bus is coming, you really got to get over to the side and hope the other person does too. Is there anything that can be done about that to improve this? Are there any other roads in town that are this bad, that need improvement?
From my perspective, all of the roads in Southampton are passable. I think these are the challenges of of living in a rural community. You have dirt roads, you have narrow roads, and if you go back a few slides to the cost of improving any of these roads, you can see how for a mile, I think I did, how long is that section of, thought I had somewhere done how long that section is.
Well, there's a section on Maple Street where it's dirt, and then it goes to pavement, and then it goes back to dirt.
Correct.
And I never understood why that happened, why it wasn't all paved.
I mean, I would,
Well, you
I
would
would
know.
suspect, yeah, I mean, I would suspect it's just because the cost of road construction is so high.
Okay.
I mean, let me reiterate how much we were given. The general fund, we're given $161,000. To construct a mile of road is $8 million. I mean, they're
Yeah.
just,
So you're saying that Maple Street, that most of it, that section where it's dirt would probably have to be total construction?
oh, absolutely. I mean, if you're going to rebuild the road, you'd want to put in engineered drainage. You'd want to comply with standards when you're going to upgrade it.
Is there, with the way the government's giving away money, is there any chance of grants to help with part of this?
There's chance, and I'm always looking for grants, but
Okay. All right, thank you.
you're welcome.
Thank you. Another speaker. Come on up to the mic if you don't mind. Come on up.
Me?
Go ahead.
Yeah. Cindy Palmer, 71 Glendale Road. Randall, I know you're working at a 50% staff, and I know it's really tough. What is the barrier for hiring filling your roles that are empty right now?
So anecdotally, what I've heard is we're not competitive with wages, and we're looking for employees or prospective employees who have 2 professional licenses, a commercial driver's license and what's called a hoisting engineer license, and that's someone that can run a loader, roadside mower, and a catch basin cleaner. And the amount of people that have those licenses, it's a very competitive market, and they can make a lot more in the private sector. So.
Thank you. Come on up. Did you have a question?
Bill York, 75 Pomeroy Meadow Road. My question is to you. I've been down to the select board 3 times to fix Maple Street, at least widen it. Take the drainage off the side that if someone goes down in a car, you're not paying for the damage. The town's not paying for the damage. It's not passable. You cannot fit 2 cars on Maple Street. Coming down from Crooked Ledge down to Maple Street, it's really impassable with 1 car just because of how bumpy it is. And there's got to be other ways to go about it other than putting riprap in the side of the road. The road's never been that shape for, I don't know, up until probably 4 or 5 years ago. It started getting like that. There's a hump out of my driveway in 79 Maple Street that you bottom your car out getting into it. So what little you have for employees, something's got to be done by the road. I pay the same taxes as anyone else in any of the spots in Southampton, same tax base.
Do
So
you have a question you would like to ask him?
I just want to know what we can do about this. Is that something that's going to be one of the major focuses going on in the future?
I take my marching orders from the select board. Currently, the priority was reconstruction of East Street, and that's one of the major projects we're working on right now.
And I see in Pomeroy Meadow Road, you put money into a cul-de-sac.
Yeah, so let me go back to the pavement preservation techniques. You don't want to let roads that are in good shape degrade to where they need to be completely reconstructed. So, you're trying to, it's preventative maintenance.
Okay. That's not acceptable as far as I'm concerned. I have been down to the select board to see them. I thought something would be in play by now.
I'm going to note that and the ideas, and we may come back to it as a comment
that'd
in the
be
next
great.
section. Okay, thank you. Any other questions for the Highway Department? We have time for just one more here before we move on.
Upper Maple Street is called a historical road? Is that what it is? Or a
Scenic road.
scenic road? So you cannot constrict traffic flow, but there's many places in the area that it says one-lane road. If you label it a one-lane road, then people will realize they can't go 40 miles an hour and that they're not on Route 10 anymore. There was an accident and the pickup truck ran into the same stone wall that the engine backed up on. The back end of the pickup truck bounced into my car, and I got pushed into the ditch on the right. I was headed up, the truck was coming down. I never saw the guy's eyes, so he must have been looking down. So can't you put a sign, local traffic only? Or because there's so much water running through there, natural water springs, perhaps those thank you ma'ams, like those ditches that would be inverted thank you traffic speed bumps or whatever.
Water bars?
Water bars, yeah. And then if that would get people's attention if they were significant. There's been times I would love, I've said it many times, just cut a utility pole in half and put it across. And that would get their attention to slow down. There's nothing you can do on that road to make it more feasible to slow down. Or local traffic only, that you can't write that. How would we get that in?
It's something we can look into.
So moving forward, just where would I go next?
So I've got this on the list of ideas, so we'll come back
Thanks.
to that, okay? All right, so thanks everyone for the good questions coming in here. I want to go ahead and shift gears, if that's okay. Thank you, Randall, appreciate that. And I'd like to invite Paul Dieman to come up from the Planning Board.
Good evening, Paul Dieman, Planning Board. The Planning Board enters into this discussion when a property owner comes before the board wanting to subdivide a piece of property that they have, making one lot, two lots, certainly not a subdivision. And it's called an A&R because approval is not required under the subdivision regulations. It's an approval by the Planning Board. And as long as it meets frontage requirements in that zone and side setbacks, rear setbacks, that's where we determine that it's a legal lot that the landowner can market for sale. We do take into consideration where it's located, and 99% of the time the lots are on well-maintained roads here in Southampton. Every now and again, you might get one out in a rural area that's possibly on a dirt road, but again, if it meets the requirements and has emergency access, then that's a consideration. We do not consider whether there's a water main running by the property. Again, 98% of them are on maintained roads that have main water supply. And furthermore, some of the areas have their own wells, so water doesn't come into play with our consideration. In subdivisions, the subdivision regulations do suggest cisterns in areas where there is not town water, and that can be mandated, although it might be in Mass General Fire Code, but I'm not quite sure if it's mandated in the town of Southampton Fire Code, but it has come up for discussion in the past. And most of the time, this will occur in areas where there's a cul-de-sac or housing with units up to 9 or 10 units. Sprinklers are not currently required, and I'm not quite sure that would go over well, although it's up for discussion if it ever comes before the board to maybe add it to the zoning regulations or building code for that matter, but that adds a substantial cost to a homeowner if a sprinkler is installed. I don't have the numbers, but I'm quite sure it's very expensive. There is currently no regulation on the length of a driveway someone could have. And to that end, amendments to the zoning regulations could be implemented if the town so chooses. When they bring them forward, we can look into them, and of course there's a public hearing, and we go forward in that regard. So when a property owner comes to us, if it meets the requirements of a legal building lot, it gets approved. We do not see any building design or anything of that nature when the plan comes before it. It's strictly the surveyed lot, and the building footprint and the specs on that come later when the building permits are pulled.
Thank you, Paul. Inviting now any questions related to planning matters.
Tammy Walunas, 298 College Highway. So the planning board sees different projects that come into town that would generate revenue for the town. But you guys don't have the final say on that. It still has to go to the zoning board or something? Is that?
Are you talking about anything in particular? I'm just talking about single lots, a residential lot.
Right. So if a cul-de-sac comes in with several houses,
right,
that's something with you. But
that
if
falls under the subdivision regulations, yes, and it
Right.
comes before the planning board.
And what about a bigger project that has commercial lots and residential lots?
That comes before us as well. Currently, under the existing zoning, it goes to ZBA first and then to the planning board. Under the new zoning that was passed a couple of weeks ago at town meeting, which won't take effect probably until the fall, that will all then go to the planning board.
Perfect. So you actually see the revenue that would be generated for the town, but we still get developments voted down. Is that correct?
I don't know if that pertains to this conversation, but
Okay.
perhaps.
I'm just curious as to see who has final say in different areas and how we can pay for these services that we want. But
Understood.
thank you.
Thank you. Other questions for planning board folks?
Rainy Road, Nate Cheryl Lane. I have a question. I've mentioned this before publicly, but I think Moose Brook Road, which is a dirt road, is not unlike Maple Street. I think it's got gullies on either side of the road. It's very narrow. I worry about emergency vehicles going up there. And there's an ice jam over the dirt road in the wintertime, which is extremely dangerous. And so I'm just wondering, if the planning board, when the new houses went in there, I think we went to speak to the planning board to voice our concern about the water. So I'm just wondering, does the planning board make site visits to see what the implications of water might be on the roads? And how do you go about evaluating whether or not a road will maintain its safety based on the drainage of water?
I think I recall the one that you're speaking of, in particular on Moose Brook, and they had to file for a stormwater permit, which was, I believe, granted to them. They had to put in measures to keep the water on their property. Now, if it's been running off of there, it certainly would have to come to the attention of the building inspector, who is the zoning code enforcement. We're not an enforcing body, but we are the stormwater management authority. If there's something that went awry with the stormwater management system, why it's not keeping the water on site, then that certainly would be something we would look into. But I think it has to start with a complaint to be looked into by the building inspector, and then if there's anything that we need to get involved with the management of the stormwater system.
time for one other question. The planning board? Okay, very good then. Then let's turn to the last of the presentations, the orientations for this evening, and that is from the fire department and Chief Workman.
Hi, Chief Workman, Belanger Road. Certainly welcome you all here tonight. I recognize firsthand the challenges and the loss of fire. Growing up, lost a house, our family did. Fire is a violent event. It doesn't care what it burns or who it hurts, and it doubles every minute. So certainly I understand the ravages of fire and the challenges of fire. I started my career, well, in the 70s in Maine. You used to listen to the whistle and you'd go off. And it's a community thing. It's who comes out from this community to go fight that fire. And in Maine, it was everybody, whether you were on the fire department or not, really. When I started my career 33 years ago, I started in Belchertown. I worked 25 years in Belchertown. Belchertown is a very rural community. It's the 6th largest community in Massachusetts. Only 40% of Belchertown at the time when I was there has fire hydrants. So for 25 years, I fought many a fire that were similar to the type of fire we had here in Southampton, that tragedy back in February. When there's not water supply, when there's challenges to water supply, if there's interruptions, if there's unforeseen, if there's fire that grows bigger than you're expecting, anything can happen that can make the challenge of putting out a fire even greater. Certainly we experienced some of those challenges on the Maple Street fire. Certainly a combination of, a very challenging road, a snowstorm that shut down Town Hall. But I would like to just throw kudos to my crew, our crew. Absolutely. Thank you. As chief, I kind of kid the guys that I come up with a car and I yell orders, but it's really the 45 men and women of the department that step forward at any moment in time, could be tonight, we could all leave, that go and leave their families to fight a fire. And generally a fire like they had on Maple Street, you would have an engine that rolls in. They would have a second engine that would run a hose line back up to a water tank, and then a water shuttle would feed that fire. In an ideal situation, that fire would have worked very smoothly. We had a crew on that is, many of them were full-time firefighters in other communities, but worked for Southampton. Had some of the most experienced drivers at that time. A driver of the engine that went off the road was a 30-year veteran of the department and works as a diesel truck mechanic. And that truck went off the road, whether it was slippery road, whether it was snow and you just get snow blindness, whether it sure wasn't intentional, and we're all doing the best we can to put out a fire. The truck that passed that fire, the house was so far off the road they didn't even see the fire. Usually fires are not hard to find. Usually when there's a fire, you see the glow. For this one here, it was so far off that we didn't see it right away. It had passed it because it was 700 feet down a driveway. They just got past it when the next engine came behind them. And that's when trouble ensued. When that truck tried to make room for the first truck to get down, it got hung up on that stone wall, and that changed the whole outcome of that fire. I know tonight we have a couple of chiefs from the area. I know Chris Norris, who's chief of Easthampton, was chief of Westhampton for quite a while, could certainly speak to the challenges of rural water supply. Pat Egloff, who's chief of Westfield, one of the larger departments in the area, they were on scene that night. Chris Norris was on scene that night. And it's still a community. So when we go to fight a fire, it's our community, and it's the community of every other town around us. And we all face the challenges of trying to do our very best to save the property. And nobody wants to see a fire. Most fires are accidents. Very rarely do we come into an arson situation where somebody intentionally does it, not in the small communities. Most fires are just, something went wrong. Somebody didn't put a candle out, a grill that's close to a house, whatever it happens to be. It's not intentional. And fires, when they really get going with any kind of delay, when they double every minute, they can be very challenging to put out. I certainly understand that. For myself, like I say, I've been in it for 33 years. I have a college education in fire science. I've gone through Mass Fire Academy for all my career, just because they're such a resource. National Fire Academy, Chief Fire Officer programs, rural water supplies. I mean, I've really spent a lot of time studying fire in my career. I've had hoisters licenses. I've got a Class 2 license with a tanker endorsement. I've had building construction license. I had number 2 oil license, quite extensive. So, we do have challenges. I'm sorry? Yeah, maybe. Because I am about to retire, and I'm sure he's looking for people. So, yeah, I know the past police chief did, but we're digressing.
You also had some slides up here about
Yeah, they want me to stay the slides, and I'm sorry, I'll keep it quick,
okay.
and you can stop me at any time. If anybody has any questions, please come to the mic. I'd be more than happy to answer anything as you have questions to it. So I have an extensive career. I have men and women on the department with an extensive knowledge of fire and in Southampton and how we operate. I know that the equipment that we have, it's not ideal. We don't have top-of-the-line tanker. We have an engine that we kind of call our tanker. We had a tanker. When I first came here, there were 3 trucks, and none of them passed a pump test 10 years ago. And when I became chief, I focused the group. We focused on getting newer equipment. We focused on passing equipment so that it would be capable of fighting fire here in town. And we've come a long way. Could we use our engine to be revamped to make it a better tanker? Absolutely we could. And that takes funding. I put in a capital request this year. There wasn't enough money for that to be funded. I put in front of the town for a new tanker. It's $450,000. Kind of the same problem Randall has with roads. It's expensive, and it has to be supported by the people. And maybe this kind of a tragedy will get people out to support it, because better equipment, a station that will actually fit our equipment. If you notice when you see our station, there's a tanker outside because we don't have room in our station to put it. I know they want me to stay on script, so let me get back to the slides. We've been in the community since 1920. Fire department responds to all emergencies, not just fires, carbon monoxide, all medical emergencies. That's probably the bulk of actually what we do. The override and the staffing that we've got is really to focus on the ambulance. It's because 2 people at the station is not a fire crew. A fire crew is at least 4 people and an administrative person in order to fight a fire. So when we go to fight a fire, we have to wait for people to respond from home. Still pretty community-based operation. The job and the tools, they change constantly. I mean, we're dealing anything now from school shootings. We dealt with white powder and the contamination set from that. The electric cars and batteries, I'm sure you've seen a lot of that in the news recently. I mean, those are real challenges that are constantly changing every day that we need to keep ourselves aware of. I'm still the only full-time firefighter in Southampton. So we have almost 50 firefighters, and they do an awesome job, and I'm really proud of them. I was proud of them that night. It wasn't the outcome I wanted to see, but I was proud of the work and the effort that they put in. But I'm only one full-time person. We don't have the resources for a full-time department, not quite yet. And we've got a good department that is trained and responds to emergencies. So I feel confident in our department. It's the unknowns that you can't always account for. Uncontrolled fire doubles every minute. The standard for a rural community is 15-minute response time. Excuse me. In Belchertown, we had 15 miles. You could go one center station. You could take 15 minutes just to get to a fire, and that's if everybody was at the station. Here in town, we already had a truck on the road that night. Add another call that diverted to go to this fire. We were on scene in that fire between 8 and 9 minutes with 2 trucks. It was an awesome response from the start. Wish it had stayed that way. Depending on mutual aid, dealing with fires outside hydrogen zones is always going to be a particular challenge. If you can hook up to a known fire source and have plenty of water, then you're going to be able to fight a fire much easier than if you're looking and searching for water. So fighting fire takes a community. I basically say that a fire is fought like a 3-legged stool. A 3-legged stool stands because there's 3 legs in the ground. And one of the 3 legs is public education. So if we teach people, if we teach young kids to go home, check smoke detectors, help mom and dad, remember to put out candles, put on your seat belts. You can send an army of kids out to check homes and keep people safe. And honestly, in Belchertown, we reduced the number of structure fires we had in half by starting a public education program that extensively went. We had about 1,000 kids we would teach. Is that on? Yeah, sorry. We would teach every year. And when we started that program, we reduced the number of home fires by 50%. It was pretty impressive. We also fight fire. That's one leg of the stool, is that public education part, because if we're careful, if we don't start a fire, that's the best. We also do code enforcement. So code enforcement means, smoke detectors when the home sale goes through. Code enforcement is when a new building of any type goes through, that it gets a plan review by the fire department. The fire department will come in for whatever it happens to be to ensure that they're being compliant with whatever the safety codes are. And there's a ton of safety codes. I mean, the code books are huge. The building inspector, who unfortunately is not here, most of what's in the building code is from fire. So whether it's fire stopping, whether it's egress doors that are supposed to close by themselves, whatever it happens to be, all that is set to keep people safe. They've had nightclub fires in Boston where people died because the doors didn't open out. And a ton of people couldn't make it out those doors. So we make changes that keep people safe. When we talk about sprinklers in residential homes, it is a possibility. The costs are the same as a heating system. So if you're building a house and it's in a rural setting, you can put in a sprinkler system. There's a few towns around that do it. I know that the Home Builders Association isn't keen on it because anything that raises costs for a home builder is not ideal. But there's a big push for sprinklers because the costs have come down so much to put sprinklers into homes that are particularly difficult to get to in the event of a fire. And if you want to protect your family, that's the best way to do it. Sprinklers are like having a firefighter in your home, in the room where the fire starts. So code enforcement, if we do that as best we can, that's going to keep our community safe. So that's the second leg of that stool. Excuse me.
Chief Workman, just need to wrap up 3-4 minutes.
Okay. The third leg is emergency response. And the problem with emergency response is once a fire starts, it's already too late. You can have 100 firefighters, you can have 50 fire trucks, and if you're running to a fire that's already started and doubling every minute, and it's, like I say, we're on scene 8-9 minutes, it's 9 times bigger from when he called. So fires are a challenge, and that's basically how we fight them. I'm going to run through this only because I don't have a lot of time. I don't want to be all night. But just firefighters, our job is not just putting out a fire in a structure. Firefighters do arson training, carbon monoxide emergencies, chimney fires, high-tension electrical safety, medical training, firefighter foam, hazardous material awareness, incident command awareness and use, ladders, lighting, working with mutual aid partners, use of all portable equipment that we have in the fire department. We have to deal with all propane emergencies, know the properties of propane and natural gas and how to fight them, radio protocols and communication, rescue operations, mountain rescues, water rescues, interior fire rescue operations, interior fire operations in general. Basically, where's a fire going to go? How can we put it out? Search and rescue. If we're looking for a victim in a fire, if we have one of our firefighters ourselves that gets stuck in a fire, we need to know how to find them, how to get them. Fire size up. When you first look at a fire, where's the smoke going? Where do you expect it to go? What kind of resources are you going to need? That's sort of the pre-planning and size up. We have thermal imagers, which after the Worcester fire, everyone got thermal imagers, which is a wonderful tool. You can go into an environment where you can't see anything, and you can look in this one tool and you can see heat signatures and tell where people are, tell where doors are. The problem is if that fails when you're in there, you need a second imager so that somebody can come in and rescue the rescuer. So thermal imagers are a great tool, but they're not an end-all to be-all. We do vehicle extrication, which is jaws of life, and that gets really challenging with some of the hybrids and where you cut things. Vehicle fires can be extremely difficult. Bumpers can fly 100 feet, take out the legs of firefighters in an engine 100 feet away. Water supply is drafting. There's water supply for winter operations, relay pumping, which is one truck to another truck to another truck, water supply shuttles where a truck drives to another truck to a water source and back. There's wildland fire operations, brush fires. We have to know sprinkler systems, how they operate, when they're in good shape, how we shut them off. Portable extinguishers. We can put out a lot of fire with a portable extinguisher, and anybody who does any kind of training with an extinguisher can recognize that. A little extinguisher lasts for about 15 seconds. So you may think that you're all set with an extinguisher, but they don't last very long. Let's see, fire alarms. We have to know all about fire alarms, all about how they work, what their requirements are. Forcible entry. How do you get into a home? Especially we protect our homes so people don't go into them, and yet fire department, we're looking to get into them. And there's a lot of tools that we use to do that. Ventilation, we need to know where those hot gases are so we can try and move those hot gases out. Ventilation on that fire was particularly difficult because it was a snowy roof, and operations on that roof were challenging. Ropes, how to tie knots, fire hose and appliances, how to use everything that we have for all the equipment that goes on a hose line and on a truck, basic fire control, salvage operations. Our whole thing is to protect people, and then it's to protect your home and your stuff, and it's to protect the environment. And we need to know building construction and of course, fire prevention. Run it down. Any questions on anything so far?
Let's go ahead and open it up for questions to the fire department.
Oh, I'm sorry?
Come on up. Yep.
Hi, Patrick Eline, 6 Gene Circle. Ms. York had brought up a point when she first came up about 40 minutes until water got on the fire. And if I thought that was true, I'd be very upset as well.
Sure.
How long, Chief, did it actually take you said you were there in 7 to 9 minutes. How long did it take for water to be put on the fire and an internal attack?
Yeah.
So I'm gonna just do one little pause here. So I understand that folks may have questions about the specific fire, and I'm gonna go ahead and allow Chief Workman to respond to this. But I do want to encourage folks to be thinking not just about that particular fire, but about the capacity of the town as a whole to respond to fires. So keep your questions sort of moving towards the forward rather than the analysis of this particular event, if you could, please. Go ahead.
Yeah, no problem. I mean, I certainly understand the challenges and the concerns because it's a loss. Our first truck in carries 1,000 gallons of water. So we had water on that fire as soon as that first engine backed down into that driveway and set up position. The challenge is that 1,000 gallons isn't going to put out a whole house fire, especially when it's had 9 minutes since we got notified of the fire and however much time it took until they notified 911. So although we had a very good initial attack on the fire, we had actually reduced smoke considerably. We didn't have the advantage of what we normally would have, which is the second truck to come in, give us their 1,000 gallons, and then lay a line up to the top of the driveway with a tank that would then have a water shuttle. So the initial water on the fire, to answer the question, was as soon as the truck was there, within a few minutes, we were squirting water from that truck onto the fire. But that doesn't mean that we had sufficient water to put the fire out. So it took some time, could have taken 40 minutes, additional time, before we had to hand lay 700 feet of hose line that's 125 pounds empty down the driveway, hand lay it in that snow, give the water that we had on that truck, and then try and get a shuttle down a very challenging road that was very hard to set up any kind of water shuttle, excuse me, that could get in. We ended up calling many mutual aid companies to assist us. And so, so adequate water, I don't know if it was ever really gotten there on that fire. Adequate water was, probably could have been hours by the time we actually had enough water to put out the extent of those flames, because by that point, the flames were engulfed the home. So the easy answer is, yeah, we had water on the fire in minutes. The challenge is that it took some time because of the circumstances to get enough water to actually extinguish the fire.
Chief Workman, there was a question that came up earlier about what happened to the tanker, and is it in use, and how is the tanker filled? I wonder if you could respond to those questions.
Sure. Yeah. So the tanker, I started to go into some of the history, and I know there's not a lot of time here. We had a tanker that had a couple thousand gallons that the state had given us, but it was set up for water, domestic water supply. It didn't really have a pump on it. It almost gravity fed the water off of the truck. It was kind of useless for firefighting operations. It was also a 10-speed transmission, which made this a very heavy, dangerous truck that not many people could drive. And so when we couldn't get parts for it, we scrapped that truck. We reverted back to an engine that is 1,000 gallons. Like I say, in Belchertown, it's similar to the setup we had in Belchertown. Didn't have the quick dump valve that a tanker should have, and that's what we were trying to get into place this last year with the capital money that we're asking for. Because if we can dump water off a truck in less than a minute, it gives us time to dump that water and then do the next job for that truck. So what we call a tanker is an engine, and I'm sorry, the question is?
How is it filled?
How is it filled? It's filled by hydrants, and it has to go to a water source in order to get water back into it.
Okay, thank you.
Does that answer
Another
your question?
question? Thank you.
This is actually a question from my niece that had to leave with her 4-year-old son. Where were the tankers that night filled?
Highway Department.
So there's the closest hydrants are on the corner of
Of High Street and Maple, but we couldn't get there.
No, we couldn't, right. So Fulmer and Russellville, right there, and then on the left, Fulmer. Why did you go all the way to the Highway Department rather than take over a mile round trip to there?
Yes.
So again, I'm going to just remind folks that we're here to not necessarily analyze this conflict, but as a concept on how you decide where you fill the tankers. Can you respond to that, please?
Yeah, certainly. Some of the challenges, like you may have a hydrant next to the road. It may be more dangerous and more challenging to do a turnaround there or to set up an operation. So I wasn't making the decision myself, but I know that the Highway Department offers ample turnaround area, plenty of area to set up and leave a crew so that tankers could come in and line up as they needed to and head right back out without blocking traffic. So I believe that was the decision made for why we used that hydrant. And as far as road time goes, I don't think it was, if it was a minute difference, it wasn't dramatic.
Minute each way.
Possibly, yeah.
And another question. We were, in the beginning of March, we were told that, by Ed, we were told that the engine or the tanker, something was very close to getting back onto the fire department. Has it returned? Whichever one was.
Awesome question. I appreciate it, Lisa. Yeah, one of the challenges we had was there was an assessment that was done of the fire department back in 2015. at that time, they said, oh, you don't need 3 engines, because we are still calling it an engine, even though we use it as a tanker. The problem is that ISO, the people that do your insurance, said that they wanted us to have at least that 3rd engine online. When the initial report came out, we used that truck until we just got the override, which gives us money to do the repairs to trucks when they're broken. Because they told us we didn't need that truck, we weren't putting money into it. So after 2015, it was on for probably 2 or 3 years, and then when it had a broken part, it went and sat at Station 2. After your fire, it's a nice truck to use. It's nice to have the resource. There's problems. It's old. It's a 1988, and also it doesn't fit in our station. But lessons learned. We can use that truck. The men and women of the department like the truck. They spent their own personal time to rebuild the pump that's on there, and now we park that truck, and we will continue to park it at the station or as close to until it gets to freezing temperatures, in which case then it will have to be mothballed back into Station 2. So it had some time out of operation. It was after your fire that we just finished that pump, because that was the same time they were doing the ISO rating. So both your fire and ISO helped push that along.
So is it ready to roll and usable
It's ready to
right
roll,
now?
and it's up behind. It's an old girl, but she works pretty good.
Thanks.
So, yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. Other questions for fire department folks? Yes, come on up.
Hello, Dan Valley, 17 Glendale Road. I have a question from one thing that was mentioned before about long driveways. Is there a maximum driveway length that our fire department can support, or is there a general rule of how long it could be that you are able to work with to?
Okay. Congratulations on being selectman.
Yeah.
Select board member.
Well, thank you, sir.
Yeah, absolutely. So, fire department, there's lots of code that we put in for safety. We try not to limit individuals to build a house that they want to build. If someone chooses that they want to build a 3-mile driveway, they need to understand that that's going to be a challenge for the fire department. And that should be pretty clear to them anyway. So rather than us regulating that, me personally, as long as they understand that that's a challenge, their insurance company understands that that's a challenge, my suggestion would be a sprinkler system, because you can install a sprinkler system. It's having a firefighter right there. It'll put out a fire in any room that there happens to be one. They do storage tanks to supply it. And my recommendation for my family would be the sprinkler system.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think I get an understanding that
Sure.
it could be as long as you want, but the longer it is, the more risk you're putting.
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Absolutely.
Thank
Any
you.
other
Next.
questions? Rini.
Rainy Groden, Cheryl Lane. I had a fire growing up too when I was 11, so it was very tragic. So my heart goes out to the family. And, I read a lot this year in the paper about fires. We had one recently in the hill towns where a woman died. So I'm grateful that nobody got injured and that the community came together to help the family with funds. I'm just wondering, I didn't hear what caused this fire in the first place, but I'm just wondering, maybe we can go on a pretty significant public education campaign, because I think that both chiefs did a presentation for the seniors last spring, and ever since then, I always set alarm if I leave the kitchen after putting something. I learned that from you, and I'm just wondering if we can do a pretty massive education campaign next year before winter, because gas grills and space heaters and wood stoves, and I didn't even know mice cause problems in wiring.
Absolutely.
So, I just think that there's a lot to know, and I think it's worth us doing something as a community.
Okay, so I've added that idea to the ideas list, which we'll come
Okay,
back to.
because I absolutely agree. I think that's a great idea. I think that most people aren't aware, and we could do fire extinguisher education. We could do lots of stuff that will really help people to be safe with fire. Because honestly, if we can be safe with fire and a fire doesn't start, we are much better off. So it's an awesome question. It'll probably go to the next chief for public education, but I believe that public education is huge and important. So I very much appreciate the question.
I'm thinking that because of time constraints, we
Sure.
may need to move on for this. I do want to note that you had, can you just describe what was in the slides without going into the slides themselves, just to understand what the
Sure.
work was?
Just the slides that I brought with me today, they all get kind of done a little bit last moment. I apologize because probably could have been more polished up here. Basically, we developed one thing that we hadn't had in the fire, and certainly, we're always looking for improvement. One of the things that we had done is I grabbed an old chief, got some old resources. We went through. I took the hydrant map, which is very detailed. I spent a couple days with him, bought him a few cups of coffee and a few lunches, and we went through and we noted every stream that went under a road in every spot where there wasn't a hydrant. And from there, we came with a map that showed, not a ton, but probably 6 different locations that we could possibly use in the event of a fire that we would have to draft from, where there's not a hydrant, but we could draft from. We've been at this since 1920, so over 100 years. And this is the first time this map has been produced. But it's a resource, and we're always getting better. So this is, one of the things we need is a stepping stone to move forward. Because the question really is, what are we going to do in the future? We're going to continue to do all the training that we talked about. We're going to continue to try and maintain our trucks, and just want to say, appreciate very much the support from the community for the override, which helps us to maintain equipment. But we're still not, full-time with tons of firefighters, so we're never gonna have all the resources we need. We're gonna do the best job with what we have. And as I started, I'm proud of the group of firefighters and the job that they did, even though the outcome was not ideal for that home.
Okay, thank you. Really appreciate that. All right, folks, so appreciate everyone's patience and good listening and good questions that have been coming out. Really grateful for that. We are going to take a brief stretch break and opportunity to take care of any other needs, but actually, we want to encourage you to use this next 2-3 minutes to let the information that you've just heard kind of sink in a little bit and think about it. What are the comments and reactions that you've had? You've already seen a few of those, but we want to invite you to be able to speak more about what is on your mind and also what are the ideas. We've started a little bit of a list as we've been going along. As folks have mentioned things, I've been trying to add them here, but I'm sure I haven't hit them all. So really wanting to hear, moving forward, what does this look like? So this little break is a chance for you to collect your thoughts if you're someone who needs that kind of extra time. And also, I just want to flag that not everybody likes speaking publicly and standing up in front of your neighbors. And so there are some forms that are going to be put along the benches here during the break where we welcome your written comments. There are some envelopes. You can do this anonymously if you like, or you can add your contact information in. But you can do these comments, turn them into the envelopes, and then the folks from the town will be taking a look at them after the meeting. Also, encourage you to put up your little sticky notes if you've got any answers for that. So we're going to be about 2-3 minutes, a little bit of a break here, and then we'll come right back. Thanks. Okay, so thank you all for sticking around. I know it's a long meeting. We do want to give a chance for folks to give input at this point, comments, reactions, ideas on what you'd like to see moving forward. So we're going to keep using the mic, so if you'd like to speak, come on up. I see we got one person here to get us started. Thank you.
Hello, Patrick Egloff, 32 Crooked Ledge Road. Been a resident for 26 years. I am also the fire chief of the city of Westfield. I want to thank Chief Illingsworth and Chief Workman, Deputy Chief Fasoli, the captains that are in the room, and all the men and women of the Southampton Fire Department and Police Department for everything they do, for coming to everybody's need at 3 o'clock in the morning, leaving their families, first of all. I have ideas, and it's only going to cost money. So, hydrants. Why don't we have hydrants in the town of Southampton? Easy. I listened to Mr. Slarity over there, and We have an elevation problem. So a water tank and a higher elevation. We have a much higher elevation here in Southampton. Problem with that, it's going to cost a lot of money. Roads, how do we fix Maple Street so that nobody goes off the road? You pave it. It's going to cost you $8 million a mile. Where's the money going to come from? Lastly, anybody in this room that's never been to the Southampton Fire Department needs to go and take a walk. Needs to go over there and see what this building looks like. It's terrible. You can't even walk between the apparatus and the wall. They shouldn't be in this building whatsoever. This town consistently in the past always votes down Proposition 2.5. They need a new station. They also need to grow. You look around. Look at Pleasant Street. Look at Red Brook Estates. Look around. This town is growing. The fire department hasn't grown. The only thing the fire department has done is added a full-time chief in the last 10 years. After that, I mean, Chief Workman's done a really good job. We have people that come, paramedics in town, that are there that you didn't used to be there. I have many members on my department that come and work in Southampton every day. You really need to have full-time members here. And I'm not just talking paramedics. You need to have full-time fire department members.
Thank you.
What happened? What happened? I will wrap it up. What happened on that night? Murphy's Law. What's gonna go bad is gonna happen. It's gonna happen. They were at the site within 8 to 9 minutes. They were already on a call. If they weren't on a call, it would have taken longer. It's still within the ISO rating. I'm here to say, as a 26-year citizen of the town of Southampton and a 34-year member of the fire service, that this town needs to go and pony up and pay for a new fire station and some full-time members. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, other folks with comments, reactions, ideas? Go ahead.
So I'd like to second everything he just said and add thanks to the town of Southampton, the superintendent, not the superintendent, well, yes, the superintendent, but Randall and his crew and what they do with a low man team, low woman team, low person team. But what I want to add is the horror that Billy lived through, the fear Lisa had that maybe it could move to her house. It's horrific. Thank God nobody was hurt. But we live out in the hills. Lisa, I'm not trying to be rude. We live out in the hills. We know this. You moved there. Billy moved there. You knew what that road was like. The only thing different is that, so I'm sorry. Well, they've just been addressing this. This meeting is not all about Billy's house. It's a horrific thing that happened, but this meeting is to try to change things. He brought up the 2.5 that historically in Southampton does not get passed. It's ridiculous. Things have, and that's wonderful, but in the 40, 50 years I've been an adult in Southampton, that's few and far between. Maybe there's been one other, don't quote me on that number, but they've been low. But people moving into Southampton, people in Southampton, for the most part, are the stingiest MFers that we really can know. They don't want to vote for this, they don't want to vote for that, but they want this, they want that when they need it. And to me, that's just not right. All right, and I'm not saying anything, I'm not relating to this. This is in general Southampton.
You wrap up?
I will try. But people come into town. I watched the show, the taping of the meeting, and people were heated and they were upset, and I get family heatings, but there were other people who moved into town who are probably lovely people, but it's like I was detained in my yard because a delivery truck got stuck in this terrible road that's here. It's like, park your car on the side of the road or whatever. I don't know. That's just the most, I was looking at it going, what the heck, people? Where did you build your house? Where did you move into?
Okay, thank you.
You know? No, I'm sorry. I don't see a lot of people raising their hands. The town is changing, sadly and greatly. I have people that I very much care for that want changes in this town that I'm not totally on board with. But things have to change. We have people town support that's all on bare bones. What do we expect when we don't pass help for these people? So, like he said, this town, people need to step up. You know, I've never had kids. Do I vote for 2.5% or over the 2.5 when the school needs more money? Of course I do. Why? Because it's common sense.
Okay, thank you. All right.
No, I have to say one more thing. I'm sorry.
You really need to wrap up.
When you live out there, okay, you need to, you know, you never think your house is going to burn down. But I now live in what used to be a horse barn. My horses always had their stall doors open unless it was a serious storm because I knew they might not get saved if a fire started. They now have an out area that's completely closed in except the side doors so they can still get out if there's a fire. When you live someplace, you need to think ahead instead of...
Thank you. I want to invite others who want to speak, I think, over here first, and then Lisa. Yes, go ahead.
Donna Whiteley, 52 Maple Street. I don't like public speaking. Anyway, so I just have a question about drafting. For those of us, I live up on Maple Street on the top of the hill, but I do have a pond. And I know that there was a pond near Lisa's house and Billy's, but can ponds be drafted from if there's a fire when there's no other water supply nearby? And how does that work? And how do you know where they are? And I think there's also a draft that was set up at one time halfway up Maple Street at Lorgan's Pond, and there's a thing out by the road. I guess because the trucks were stuck, you couldn't have gone up and down Maple Street, but would that have worked as a place to draft water from that would have been closer? So it's not going to change what happened in the past, but going forward, if it was my house, I just want to know. And how do everyone on the scene, the fire, you know, how do you know, how do you train your guys so they know where these locations are? And if somebody has a pool, can you use the pool water to put the water out? The pool's right there and full of water.
Okay. Thank you for those questions. Chief Workman?
Great questions, all very good questions. So a draft, some of the challenges of the draft is they're not always quick and simple to set up. The other challenge that you often have with a water supply is they silt in. And if there's too much sediment, you try and put a strainer in and you end up just sucking up mud or rocks or whatever that happens to be. On Red Brook that crosses below on Maple Street, it's actually with a beaver dam there. It's actually kind of a good draft site. And had it not been blocked, could have been a tremendous one for that evening. We have gone up since with that beaver pond and drafted out of there. It's not a quick operation, so it's not immediate you have water because there's water right there. But you can certainly get water. It means you stick a hose in, you use the truck suction to bring it into the truck, and then you move the water out of it. That's a draft. There's other draft sites around the town that we have identified and are working with. All of them, it's not a hydrant, so you can't just go up to it, pull water out cleanly all the time. The challenge is to like a pond that animals feed from. The environmental folks, Concom, says that you can't consider a animal feed pond to be a draft point because of the bio problems that you have by spreading it around. So if animals defecate in it and then you spread that on a fire, it's not healthy for the surrounding town. So I know that Chesterfield had gone in and actually petitioned the state because they had a lot of animal feed ponds that they wanted to designate as draft points, and they couldn't because of that reason, because it's a biohazard, basically. The other challenge that you have is, I was just talking earlier to a gentleman over here who had, when he was on the department, had put in some, what they call a dry hydrant. And a dry hydrant is a pipe that you can hook up to. It's already pre-piped into the static water source, into the pond. The problem is that they're difficult to maintain. And so if they sediment up, something blocks them, a screen goes. I mean, it was probably 50 years ago that this gentleman had put those in. And I was trying to be good. And so they're very difficult to maintain. So we have a standard. So if somebody wanted to put in a dry hydrant and considered a dry hydrant that the fire department will use, we actually have a standard that they would have to do that to. And it includes a buoy, so you can set the height of the water suction, multiple heads, so it's not just all sucking in from one head because that's too much suction pressure. It needs at least 2, 3 is ideal. And it's a flexible hose that you can pull it out of the water to maintain it. So it makes it so we or whoever homeowner can maintain it. So we can absolutely, and encourage folks, if you have a static water supplies, if you've got a pond on your property, then please bring it to our attention. We'll certainly try and come out and look at it, assess it. If we can add it to the database that we've built, I mean, we've just really revamped our database. So if we can revamp that database and include what you have for a water feature, absolutely we can use it. Pools, we can use a pool. Pools have chlorine. Not ideal. The other thing is if you collapse somebody's pool, especially an in-ground pool, it gets to be an expensive thing, and you got to balance. You know, they love it if you save their house, but if you only save their garage and their pool costs $10,000 because it collapsed, then all of a sudden you're not a hero anymore. So there really becomes sort of a judgment call when you're looking at any kind of static source. What are the, you know, have we looked at it before? If we use a pool, like there was a pool that night that we could use, was on the backside of the fire. One of the things that I was trying to get when I went through the Capitol was a better portable pump, because if we had a portable pump, you potentially could use a portable pump for a pool. A little easier, even if you had to carry it in where you can't get a truck, like in the back of the house. That's a possibility. The portable pumps we have are not sufficient for a structure fire because you need a lot of water. So you need a portable pump. And I'd spec'd out two. They're $10,000 each. You know, it's not a ton of money, but it's money. And there wasn't enough money in capital to do that. Maybe next year. You know?
Thank you. Thanks. Okay, let me open it up to another person. And if anyone else has comments, reactions, or questions, I encourage you to kind of go ahead and let us know, because I know we're getting late here, so I want to make sure those who do want to speak get a chance to. Go ahead.
And thank you again for this meeting. During the Thursday evening trainings or drills that you do, what are the modifications to your trainings that you and I had talked about in March, just looking back and correcting, making your force stronger to fight fires in non-hydrant or even hydrant zones?
Absolutely. So after every fire, and certainly your fire, but every fire, we do what they call an after action. So the department comes together to look at what went well, what didn't go well, where we can make improvements, what can we do with the truck, what we can add on for training, those sorts of things. For your fire, we worked on the database of static water supply and trying to add to that. And we encourage anyone that has a static water to come to us. Trainings, we actually had done a drafting in that particular site. The challenge that we have is that even though it sounds like every Thursday night is a lot of time, I don't know if you remember the list that I put up there for everything.
40 points. I counted them.
Yeah, okay. And that's, honestly, I could probably think of more, but I was trying to keep my slides down. So there's a lot that we need to know. And so I can't guarantee you that we can only focus on that drafting point, but I can absolutely say that we've done more towards drafting. We've spent a lot of time with trucks, just going over operation of trucks, getting people trained on trucks, water shuttles, water relays, setting up times with other communities, like, Westhampton, Westfield, Easthampton. I mean, we've started dialogue to set up more trainings. Recently, we've sent a group to the Fire Academy, which involves different aspects, not all specifically on drafting, but some in that general area of water supply and fire attack. So the men and women are training every Thursday, and they're out there, and we're doing work. It's not all for the focus on drafting, but it certainly is inclusive of that and has expanded.
And since at one point the fire engine couldn't get into the driveway to a recent fire, moving forward, have you guys been practicing pulling out your hose, dragging the hoses, or laying the line or whatever, to firefighter practicing, running as if their house depended on it? It's 100 feet, and you said it's like 700 pounds or something?
It's about 125 pounds of a hose
Right.
line.
So have
so
you practiced that more just so they're stronger and ready to do it if it happens again?
I feel as though our firefighters are trained in what they do. You can't train for every eventuality. So are they doing physical fitness every time they pull a hose, roll a hose, lay out a hose? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Can we lay it down a 600-foot driveway in the ice? That's not training that we specifically do, but we certainly train on rolling out hose and accounting for any circumstance that comes our way. So there's no way that we could, because a fire starts, if someone starts a fire, it doesn't mean that we can put it out. It doesn't mean that we're going to know they're not going to burn the same way twice. In my experience, it's very rare that they burn the same way twice. So we have to be ready for how it burned, for what happened there, and how we project things may burn in the future and what we can do. So some of the changes that we've made is we've brought in extra resources from other communities because it's limited. Southampton is still a small town. We don't have the full-time firefighters. So we're a limited group. So if we land on scene with 20 firefighters that have been to training most Thursday nights, when most people are home eating dinner and we're training, we're going to do the best job we can. And on that fire that night, we did a good job.
And I appreciate that.
And we had firefighters that almost got hurt in that fire because we give it 110%. And so I can't guarantee you that we can do any of those things better than we did because we did them as best we could.
And we talked about
just wrap up?
Fontaine Road. Did you drive down that
I
to
did.
see what would that have been part of the relay to make it?
Yeah, Fontaine Road. Some of the challenges with a non-town road is
The town used to maintain it.
Okay, do they now?
No. Is it at all possible to?
So I'm going to just sort of invite a final response. brief
Fontaine
response
Road
on
was discontinued formally, so no, we cannot maintain it. We do not maintain it.
Is there any way to get it back into the system? What the procedure would be?
If someone were to bring it forward to have it accepted as a town way, number one, it has to be donated to the town. Number two, it would have to have a full survey of it. And number three, it would have to be turned over to meet the town standards as a public way, which means constructing it.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next up.
Rainy Road and Cheryl Lane. I think most people in this room are aware of this, but in case you're not, I just want you to hear this
Please.
too, if you don't mind. Southampton is about to sign a contract for a feasibility study for a new public safety complex. This town desperately needs a public safety complex. The employees of the police and fire department and the dispatch deserve to work in a building that wasn't built around the time of the Civil War. If you want to talk about morale, you want to talk about getting together and supporting the fire and police departments, we absolutely totally need everybody's support for this building. So right now it's at the point of the feasibility study getting started, and then there'll be a building committee and a capital committee, but I hope that everybody in this room will notify at least 12 people that there's a study right now about the plans for a public safety complex, and please generate all the support you can.
Thank you. Last. Go ahead, Ren.
So I just had a couple of thoughts. on what we might be able to brainstorm here. I think there are people who moved into this town because it's a rural community, and maybe they want to live out at the end of Fulmer Road with a 1,000-foot driveway. I think it's worth discussing whether we continue to allow that, or maybe we have strict prohibitions on driveways of certain length and grade. We might want to talk about or discuss prohibition or a moratorium of granting curb cuts or building permits on gravel roads, because I keep hearing that they're the, quote, worst roads in Southampton, and we have 5 miles of them. Maple Street is only a half mile, which if you look back on my slides, that would be $4 million to reconstruct. I think there's a lot of zoning that we could look at tightening up if that is what Southampton wants to do, but I think we need to have a bigger discussion of what the residents of Southampton want Southampton to look like.
Thank you, Randall. I want to go ahead and just mention here, since Randall got us started on this, that there have been quite a number of ideas. We've started this list over here, but just to note that some of those may be also replicated here. There's been talk about full-time fire department staff, building the fire station, improving the current engine and tanker, changing dispatch instructions, certifying more water supply points and adding those to dispatch instructions, evaluating and improving roads with override support, helping to rebuild static water supply sources near roadways, offering street signage to private ways, adding to dispatch street lists private ways, extending hydrants, setting standards for dry hydrants, painting hydrant bonnets, mandating cisterns, requiring sprinklers, prohibitions that Randall just mentioned related to the driveway length and grade, and also the curb cuts. So just to say that there have been a number of other ideas that have also been emerging as some of the town folks have been looking at the current situation. I do want to be conscious of time. We're running fairly late. We had intended to be finished up by now. So I guess I'm just wondering, and I'm going to invite you to speak up very, very briefly. Are there some of the things that you've heard folks talk about that just seem either like, yes, absolutely, this is what we should be doing, we should be putting time towards this? Or is there anything rising to the top for anyone as you think about what you've heard?
Cindy Palmer, Glendale Road. I'm just amazed that I hope a lot of people are listening to this on the follow-up YouTube channel. We have a town of greater than 6,000 people. That includes kids, of course. And there are a lot of people here, but there aren't a great number of people here. We have a lot going on in our town right now, and we, as Rini just pointed out, we're in the middle of moving forward on desperately needing public safety building. I'm listening to this chief going above and beyond to explain everything about training and everything about his force and everything about his history. And I almost want to say, I can't imagine what else he could say or do. We cannot micromanage a professional. He is a professional. Hopefully the next chief will be every bit as professional as this person is, because he is fabulous, in my opinion. He educates, and he involves, and he's patient. And he works as the only full-time person. His staff is part-time, and they come from other communities, thank goodness, and I'm glad this chief over here spoke, because he's got the reflective thing here. We actually need to think of ways to improve funding to our town, and I'm not sure it's development, because every time you build a house, that's going to mean more demand on the municipal services. Do not deny that. There's a study that's been done that shows for every dollar you bring in tax dollars, there's at least a 1 cent or 2 cent or up to 16 cents greater that's demand on public services, and our town is growing. So the answer is I'm not the finance expert. We read in the newspaper last week that one of the members of our finance committee quit because they could never get a quorum or something. That was her rationale, I guess. But I don't have the answers except communication. This is what we really lack in this town. We desperately try to figure ways to get people to come out to all the town meetings, to get to this kind of an important meeting. Thankfully, Ed put the emergency call out, and I'm not sure everybody got the emergency call. I'm hoping people are listening to me who are not here, because we do need to improve ways. I know we're going to have a new website in town that's going to help, an improved website. So that's not an answer. It's just a reflection of the problems. And to say thank you to Chief Workman, because he really is doing a good job. And Lisa, I know you really care for what happened, and yet we can't micromanage this person. He is a professional, and we can't do any more than we're doing. That's my feeling on this.
Okay, thank you. Can I see a show of hands here? Any of you who are here, is this a topic that you would like to have more conversations about, working groups or something like that? Can you raise your hands high? And somebody who knows Southampton folks better than I am, can you make a note of who's got their hands up? Keep them up for a second. So, yeah. Thank you. Did somebody capture who all those were?
Yeah, I've got an idea.
Okay, great. So if you raise your hands, thank you. I'm going to guess that you're going to be hearing from folks about continuing this conversation. I really appreciate what everyone has done in terms of their time and attention this evening. Chris, did you have something that you wanted to say just as we're wrapping up
Just
here?
a couple things. I do really want to reiterate a big thank you for those that did turn out today, and I think it's the start of a conversation. It's the first time we've ever tried to do this, so we didn't have the turnout that we had hoped for, but I know people are tired of doing meetings, and it's very hard to have one during a night, middle of the week kind of night. But I think this is just the beginning in my mind. There are many things here that I see in terms of ideas, as well as ideas that we've already talked about amongst ourselves here as town officials, but others that came up tonight. Some of those I think are kind of what, I hate the term, but it's been used so much, low-hanging fruit, things that I think we could grab onto, 2 or 3 things that we might be able to start with and actually make some steps forward. Some things are huge and way bigger than us and require a lot of money, but there are other things that I think that are within our purview. If we could, maybe we could set up a working group, interested people that would really want to put their heads together and just do some real research in terms of what's possible and help, the town officials put something together that would help improve things going forward. So appreciate your time. Thank you, everybody, for coming and spending longer probably than we had anticipated. So I appreciate that.
Thanks, everyone.